Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
It started like any other Wednesday morning. The sun came through the curtains in those gentle slants, the kind that makes the room look warmer than it is. I got up first, as usual, slipped on my hoodie, made my way to the sink, brushing my teeth in that automatic, half-awake way people do when they've done the same thing for years. The only thing that broke the rhythm was a familiar vibration against the marble countertop, my wife's phone. It lit up. She'd left it charging overnight, screen face up, without much care in the world. A message preview hovered at the top like a tiny bomb waiting to go off. Can't wait to see you at the beach house. I miss your skin against mine. I stopped brushing. Just froze there, staring at those words like I was trying to convince myself I'd read them wrong. But I hadn't. They were right there. Plain. Filthy. Intimate in a way that made me want to throw the phone across the room and smash it. But I didn't. I stood there, toothbrush in my mouth, foam gathering in the corners, heart no longer beating in the regular way. It wasn't even panic I felt. It was something heavier than that certainty. You know that strange, quiet moment when something you always feared becomes real? That was this moment. The sender's name was just M. At first, I thought maybe it was a marketing message, something stupid and automated. But who signs marketing emails like that? And skin against mine? Not even the sleaziest spam writes like that. No, this was someone she knew. Someone she met at a time I thought she was working. Or maybe not. Maybe it was during her girls' weekends. I never questioned because trust, to me, wasn't just a word. It was how I operated, how I loved. I didn't check the rest of the message. I didn't unlock the phone. I just stood there in our bathroom, the bathroom I remodeled myself with my own hands, the one she always bragged about to her friends. Jason made that sink himself. And realized that while I had been building things for her, she had been tearing things down behind my back. Eventually, I spit the toothpaste into the sink, rinsed my mouth, splashed cold water on my face. I looked into the mirror and saw a man who had no idea how long he'd been living with a stranger. Or maybe I did know, deep down. Maybe the signs were always there, and I just kept finding prettier explanations for them. There were the late-night texts she'd laugh off. "Oh, it's just Mia," she'd say, waving me off with that breezy voice like I was being silly. The sudden extra work trips. The scent of cologne that wasn't mine on her clothes. Something I once chalked up to a crowded elevator or a coworker's hug. But this? A beach house rendezvous? That made everything click into place. The irony wasn't lost on me. That beach house she was headed to with her secret lover? I paid for it. Every shingle, every window, every damn tile. I bought it before we were married in Sandport, where the ocean hums like a lullaby and the evenings smell like driftwood and salt. That house had my sweat in its walls. I'd driven 4 hours each weekend to oversee the renovation. She'd only been there twice. Said it was too quiet for her taste. I remember thinking how weird that was, considering how she always said she wanted a place to escape to, something peaceful and serene. Guess that wasn't what she wanted anymore. Or maybe it never was. She came into the room a few minutes later, wearing her robe, her hair tied up loosely like always, smiling like life was just peachy. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I replied. I didn't ask about the message. Not then. Not yet. I tucked it away, like a blade in my pocket, waiting for the right time. She kissed my cheek like she'd done 1,000 times before. It didn't burn, didn't sting, but it didn't feel like anything either. Just empty. Like someone was mimicking a routine they no longer believed in. That day, I went to work like I always did. No shouting, no accusations, no tears. I played it calm because I needed answers before I made a move. And I needed to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Back at the office, I sat at my desk with the blinds half drawn. My assistant, Jordan, handed me a contract to review. I stared at it for 30 minutes and couldn't read a word. All I could think about was that message. That line. "I miss your skin against mine." That was the kind of line that didn't belong in a text unless something had been going on for a while. The worst part? I couldn't even imagine what I'd done to deserve this. I wasn't perfect. No one is. But I'd never lied to her. Never stepped out. Never stopped showing up. I took her mom to her doctor's appointments when she couldn't. I paid off her credit card debt from before we got married. I even switched jobs once so we could live closer to her sister when she had her second baby. I gave, and I gave, and I gave. And now she was giving herself to someone else. By evening, I knew I couldn't just let it go. I needed to see everything. I had to know how far this went. So while she was in the shower, I waited outside the door, pretending to scroll through the news. When she came out and left her phone unattended on the bed for a few seconds, I picked it up, angled it toward her finger as she walked past, and gently pressed it to the fingerprint sensor. It worked. The phone unlocked with a soft click. I sat down, heart hammering, hands steady, and that was when my suspicions turned into truth. Message after message. Photos. Voice notes. Dates and locations. Not one mistake. Not one hesitation on her part. She wasn't even scared of getting caught. That's how deep her confidence went. That's how sure she was of my ignorance. But I wasn't ignorant anymore. I took screenshots. Backed them up. Copied contact names. I kept everything I could find. Then I saw something unexpected. A picture of him. Marcus Rayner. Tall. Always in a suit. Looked like someone who paid extra for valet and tipped just enough to seem generous. And then something else. Another woman's name buried in the messages. Not Betrayal. Not me. Aubrey. The woman Marcus was married to. He had a wife. And she had no idea either. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to yell or break anything. I wasn't going to confront my wife and listen to her fake cry her way through another lie. I had a better idea. And it started with finding Aubrey. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Betrayal, watching the soft rise and fall of her breathing, wondering how many nights I had done this same thing, completely unaware that the woman beside me had carved out a separate life right under my nose. Every breath she took sounded like a lie. Every movement, every whisper, every murmur in her sleep made me feel like I was in bed with a stranger wearing my wife's skin. At 3:17 a.m., I slipped out of bed and sat on the living room couch with her phone in my hand. My own phone sat beside me, open to a blank email draft. I wasn't sure what I was doing exactly. I only knew I needed to find her. The other victim in this mess. The woman who had no idea that her husband was sneaking around with mine. Aubrey Rayner. I started with Marcus. His messages to Betrayal were riddled with endearments and disgusting little details. Can't wait to taste you again. You looked so good in that red dress last time. Bring it again. They've been meeting for months. Every so-called conference he mentioned matched up with Betrayal's client trips. The timeline was like a puzzle falling into place, one piece after another forming a picture I didn't want to see. But then I found something useful. Marcus had emailed her once from what looked like a business account. I traced the domain and pulled up the name of his consulting firm. From there, it was just a few Google searches before I found their corporate profile photo, the two of them together at a gala. Marcus with his plastic smile, and beside him, a woman with calm brown eyes and soft features. Her name was listed right underneath. Aubrey Rayner, executive partner. Betrayal's lover had a wife. One who probably had no clue her husband had turned their marriage vows into a mockery. I stared at Aubrey's face. She didn't look like someone who screamed or caused scenes. She looked like the kind of woman who internalized her pain. Quiet strength. The kind of strength that doesn't explode, but burns slow. I didn't want to hurt her, but she deserved to know. Just like I had to know. So I opened Facebook. Typed her name. Her profile popped up. Not private, not hidden. She wasn't one of those people who guarded their online life like a fortress. There were pictures of her and Marcus on vacation. Her baking with what I guessed was her niece. Her walking along the beach at sunset. The same beach, in fact, where Betrayal and Marcus were planning to meet in a few days. I stared at that image, heart thudding. The betrayal looked even worse against the softness of Aubrey's smile. I hovered my finger over the message button. My hand shook, just a little. Not from fear, but from the weight of what I was about to do. I wasn't just exposing Betrayal. I was about to tear down another woman's world too. But not because I wanted revenge. Because she had the right to know. I started typing. Hi Aubrey, I know this is going to come out of nowhere. Please understand I'm not writing this to hurt you. I'm writing it because you deserve to know the truth, the same way I just did. Your husband, Marcus, has been having an affair with my wife, Betrayal. They've been planning a weekend together at my beach house in Sandport, without knowing that I found out. I thought you should know before it happens. I'm sorry. I read it twice. Added my full name. Clicked send. Then I sat in the dark. Waiting. My eyes burned from exhaustion. My chest felt like someone had put a cinder block on it. But I waited. Nothing happened for a while. I thought maybe she hadn't seen it. Maybe she'd block me or think I was some scammer or troll. But then at 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Is this real? Please, I need to understand. Can we talk? I closed my eyes and exhaled like I hadn't done in days. We went back and forth for a while. I told her who I was. She asked for proof. I sent screenshots, nothing vulgar, just enough to confirm everything I'd said. She responded with silence for 15 whole minutes. Then came another message. He told me he had a leadership retreat this weekend. That's where he said he was going. I made him a travel bag. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Something about the intimacy of it. A wife lovingly packing a bag for a husband headed into someone else's arms. It made my stomach churn. I told her I understood. That I knew the pain, because I was in it too. I offered to meet somewhere public, neutral, just to talk. I didn't expect her to say yes. But she did. There's a diner halfway between my place and yours. It's called Willow's. I can be there tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I agreed. The next day, I got up early. Showered, shaved, wore the kind of button-down you put on for clarity, not style. I drove the hour and 10 minutes in silence, windows down, letting the air slap me awake. The diner was small and tucked between a hardware store and a post office. I parked and sat in the lot for a while, watching every car that pulled in. She arrived 5 minutes before 9. Aubrey looked like the pictures, but smaller, more fragile. Like the truth had compressed her over time. But there was something sharp in her eyes. Not wild, not angry, just awake, alert, wounded. We didn't hug. We didn't shake hands. We just sat down across from each other in that red booth, the kind that squeaks when you shift your weight. Thank you for reaching out, she said. Thank you for answering, I replied. Then we just opened up. No theatrics, no pacing, just facts and hurt and disbelief braided together in our words. She showed me messages from Marcus too. He had sent her a selfie from a hotel room 3 weeks ago and told her he missed her. That was the same weekend Betrayal said she was at a branding retreat. I feel like an idiot, she said. You're not, I said. They are. We just trusted the wrong people. She nodded slowly, blinking hard. I ordered coffee. She did too. We didn't eat. We kept comparing stories, matching lies, unraveling months of deception like two people solving a murder, except the victim was our piece, and the killers were the ones we loved. At one point she asked, "What are you going to do about it?" I looked at her for a long time. Then I said, "I have a beach house. They're planning to meet there this weekend." She didn't say anything. I went on. "It's under my name. Betrayal doesn't know I know. Marcus clearly doesn't either." Aubrey took a long breath. "You want to confront them?" "Not in a dramatic way," I said. "No screaming. No drama. Just truth." She stared into her cup, then slowly looked up. "Let's do it together." The next morning, I arrived at Willow's diner a little early. Again, I don't know why I was nervous. Maybe because everything still felt surreal, like I was living someone else's story. My palms were damp against the ceramic coffee mug as I waited, trying not to think too hard about how strange this all was. Sitting in a booth with the wife of my wife's lover. The other betrayed. The mirror version of me. When Aubrey walked in, I could tell she hadn't slept much either. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but not from tears. More like someone who'd cried out everything there was to cry and was now running on the last fumes of composure. Her hair was tied back, neat and intentional. She wore a slate-gray jacket and a thin silver chain around her neck. Everything about her was simple, but you could feel the effort behind the simplicity. She sat down across from me and gave a small, polite smile. "Thanks for meeting again," she said. "I didn't think you'd want to," I admitted. "Neither did I," she said softly, stirring her coffee even though she hadn't added anything to it. "But I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. About the beach house." I nodded. The waitress came by and refilled my mug. Aubrey asked for chamomile tea. She folded her hands around the warm cup when it came, like it was the only solid thing she could trust at the moment. We sat there in silence for a while. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, it just knows its place. There was a comfort in it, strange as it sounds. The kind of comfort that comes from shared grief. Like we were both attending the funeral of a relationship we hadn't realized had already died. "Finally," she said, "I always thought I'd know if he was cheating. I thought I was too intuitive to miss something like that." I gave a half laugh, not out of amusement, but recognition. I used to say the same thing. Thought I was a good judge of character. Turns out, I just wanted to believe in her more than I wanted to believe in my instincts. Aubrey nodded. He was so careful. Always left his phone face down. Said it was a privacy thing. Used to laugh when I asked too many questions. Told me I was overthinking. You know what's ironic? What? He works in cybersecurity. She smiled bitterly. And I never once thought to check his history. That made me pause. You trusted him. Exactly. and he used that trust as a weapon. She pulled out her phone and opened a gallery. Without hesitation, she turned the screen to me. Photos, screenshots, conversations between Marcus and my wife. Most of it mirrored what I'd seen, but there were a few new ones that hit like punches to the gut. One message from Betrayal: "I hate how sweet Jason is. It makes it harder to lie." Another from Marcus: "Let him be sweet. It makes us the villains, sure, but I'd still rather have you." I couldn't stop my jaw from tightening. I pushed the phone back gently. "They turned us into punchlines," I muttered. "We were the setup to their jokes." "I think that's the worst part," she said. "Not just the betrayal, but the way they talked about us. Like we were stupid. They convinced themselves we were too blind to notice," I said. Aubrey looked out the window, her fingers still gripping the tea mug. "I want to take that away from them." "What?" "That smug sense of invincibility. That power they think they have. I want them to walk into that beach house thinking they've won something and instead find us sitting there, whole, aware, and absolutely done." I looked at her for a long moment. She was calm, but there was steel beneath it. A storm without thunder. I admired that. "We'll be there," I said. "Let's not yell. Let's not cry. Just sit in their illusion and let the silence tear it down." She nodded. "Do we bring proof?" "I've already started collecting it," I replied. "Bank statements, hotel bookings, her texts. My lawyer said if I wanted to pursue divorce, I'd have more than enough. But this isn't just about court anymore." "No," she agreed. "This is about closure. About dignity." I paused, looking down at the table. "Have you decided what you'll do after?" She took a slow breath. "Not completely. But I won't be married to a man who looks me in the eyes and lies like it's nothing. I know that much." There was a strength to her that made me feel less alone. Like we weren't just casualties of infidelity. We were the aftermath, refusing to be wreckage. For the next hour, we planned things out. The beach house was a 2-story place with an open living room and wraparound porch. It overlooked a quiet patch of sand that rarely saw tourists. I told her the key was hidden under a driftwood lantern. She wrote it down. We'd arrive early, park away from the house, and leave the front door unlocked. We'd sit in the living room with 2 glasses of wine and a folder each. One with her collected proof, one with mine. We'd say nothing unless spoken to. And when it was over, we'd leave. No shouting. No slamming doors. No chasing them down with broken hearts. Just 2 people walking away on their own terms. There was something powerful in planning it. Like taking control back. We weren't going to beg or plead. We weren't going to demand answers from people who had already chosen to live in dishonesty. We were going to let them choke on their own storylines. As we stood to leave, Aubrey paused by the door and looked at me. "Jason," she said. "Yeah, thank you. For not going crazy. For being calm. I don't know if I would have handled this as quietly if I were doing it alone." I smiled, just a little. Maybe that's why this happened the way it did. So we wouldn't have to go through it alone. She gave me one final nod and walked out into the soft morning light. I stood there in the diner for a while, thinking about how strange it was to find companionship in heartbreak. But it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like clarity. By the time I got to my car, I had made peace with one truth. This plan wasn't about revenge. It was about regaining control of my story. About looking betrayal in the eye and refusing to let it change who I was. I drove home in silence. That night, when Brielle laughed at something on TV and leaned her head on my shoulder, I let her. Not because I was weak, but because in just a few days, I'd be done pretending. She didn't know it yet, but her last lie was already behind her. When I got home that night, the beach house key was already in my pocket. Brielle was in the kitchen when I walked in, humming to herself and chopping vegetables like she hadn't just spent the past 6 months carving out a second life behind my back. She wore that light blue cardigan I bought her last Christmas. Said it made her feel wrapped in peace. The irony made me want to scream. Instead, I smiled and kissed her cheek. "Smells good," I said. "She smell?" I nodded. "Yeah, you mentioned a client retreat. Out near Sandport, right?" She hesitated for half a second. Just half. Most people wouldn't notice it. But now that I knew what to look for, I caught it. That flicker of panic behind her eyes before she forced the smile back. "That's the one," she said. "It's a weekend leadership event. Very boring stuff. You'd hate it." I just nodded. "Guess I'll find something to do with the free time." She looked relieved. Like a mouse dodging a trap it didn't know had already been set. And that's when I realized she really thought she was getting away with it. That her lies were still working. It wasn't anger I felt. Not anymore. That emotion had long since burned itself out. What I felt now was something colder, cleaner. The kind of clarity you only get after everything's been reduced to ash. The next morning, I called Aubrey. "Still in?" I asked. Her voice on the other end was steady. "Absolutely." I told her to meet me Friday evening at the house. I'd drive down early, clean the place up, make it look inviting. Like a getaway meant for two lovers, which, in a way, it was. Just not the lovers they expected. She paused. "You sure you're okay doing this?" I've never been more sure about anything. There's a strange kind of relief that comes with finally accepting the truth. Like being let out of a prison you didn't even realize you were in. And I'd spent too long in that cell, lying to myself, excusing things, pretending not to notice how distant Betrayal had become. I called it stress, work, hormonal shifts. Anything but what it really was, a woman drifting, already gone. After I hung up, I drove to the storage unit where I kept old paperwork. Financial records, travel bookings, receipts, anything that could support what we already knew. I wasn't planning to take them to court just yet, but I wanted them printed and ready, tangible, unarguable. Proof that this wasn't just a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, a choice, a betrayal that had gone on for far too long. I bought 2 new folders. One blue, one gray. Something symbolic about that. Calm colors. The opposite of the storm they'd walked us into. I labeled mine, Jason, documentation. The other I handed to Aubrey when we met at the house Friday evening. She was already there when I pulled up. She stepped out of her car holding a tote bag and a folder tucked under her arm. She wore jeans, sneakers, a windbreaker. Nothing dramatic. Just practical. Intentional. Focused. We stood on the porch for a second, looking out at the sea. It was quiet. The tide was low. The wind smelled like salt and eucalyptus from the trees behind the house. "This place is beautiful," she said softly. "It was supposed to be our escape," I said. "Now it's just the setting for closure." She looked at me, then nodded. "Closure sounds good." We went inside. The house hadn't been used in months, but it still felt like home to me. Lightwood floors, clean white walls, soft gray furniture. Minimal, serene, quiet. A place for breathing. A place for ending. We spent the next hour preparing. I dusted the living room and lit a few candles, not too romantic, just enough to make the space feel warm. Aubrey arranged the wine glasses on the coffee table. I printed out a photo of the 4 of us, taken from one of Marcus's social media accounts, from a charity event years ago. We were all in the background, smiling, clueless. I slipped it between the folders. "Think they'll even show?" she asked. "They're too deep into their story not to," I replied. We took a seat on the couch and looked around. Everything was ready. The lights were dimmed just right. The music system played soft jazz in the background. The scene was set. It looked like a perfect welcome for 2 people expecting a romantic weekend. We sat in silence for a long while. Not uncomfortable, just still. Aubrey broke it first. "Do you still love her?" she asked, not looking at me. It took me a moment to answer. "I think I loved who she used to be. Or maybe who I thought she was. I don't really know if that's the same thing." She nodded. "Yeah, I ask myself that every night. If I loved Marcus or the idea of Marcus. It's hard to tell the difference once the mask cracks," I said. "You start wondering how much was real." "Exactly," she said. "And yet, here we are, people who gave their best. Still giving it," I said. "Even in the end." She looked at me then, really looked. And in her eyes, I didn't see sadness. I saw resolve. Quiet, steady resolve. "I'm glad it's you," she said. I wasn't sure what she meant at first. "To sit within this moment," she added. "I don't think I could do this alone." "You're not," I said. And for a second, we both just sat there, 2 people who hadn't asked for this war but had decided not to be casualties either. We went over the plan again. Simple. Clean. No yelling. No accusations. Just be present. Let them walk into their own mess. Let the truth do the talking. We wouldn't ambush them. We wouldn't scream. We'd just be there. Existing in the house they thought was theirs for the weekend. A place they had no right to. A peace they hadn't earned. Eventually, we made up the guest rooms, one for me, one for her. We agreed not to talk once they arrived unless necessary. No emotion. No performance. Just truth. Before heading to bed, I stood by the back window and stared at the moonlight on the water. For years, I'd wanted to share this view with Betrayal. I pictured lazy mornings with coffee on the deck, soft conversations in the early light. I imagined we'd grow old here. Instead, I was about to end my marriage here. Funny how life rewrites your stories. From behind me, Aubrey's voice was low. It'll be over soon. Yeah, I said. And we'll finally breathe again. We turned off the lights, locked the doors, and let the silence of the ocean cradle us into the final night before everything changed. Saturday morning broke with a stillness that didn't feel real. I stood barefoot in the kitchen of the beach house, watching steam rise from the mug in my hands. I wasn't drinking the coffee, just holding it, feeling the warmth against my skin, grounding myself. It was quiet. The kind of quiet you only get near the ocean. The wind outside whispered against the windows, and the sea stretched out like a secret too big to carry. Aubrey emerged from her guest room around 8:15 a.m. wearing a soft beige sweater and black jeans. She looked calm, composed, but I knew better now. Her stillness was a kind of armor. It had to be. Sleep okay? I asked. As well as someone can on the edge of a battlefield, she replied, her voice dry. I gave a faint nod and poured her a cup of coffee. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. Everything that had to be said was already folded into the silence between us. The weight of what was coming didn't need narration. Around mid-morning, we began setting the stage. The living room, with its wide windows and view of the sea, became our battleground. But not a chaotic one. No raised voices. No broken plates. Just a room that looked like it belonged to two people ready for an intimate weekend, just not the people they expected. Aubrey placed 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, side by side, near the sofa we'd chosen to sit on. Not across from each other, next to each other. It was intentional. They'll think we're a couple, she said. I smirked. And they won't be entirely wrong. Just not in the way they think. On the table between the glasses, we laid out the folders. Mine had black trim. Hers was navy blue. Inside each, printed emails, text threads, hotel confirmations, restaurant receipts, photos, screenshots of affectionate names, and more importantly, timelines. Evidence. Proof. Should we include the picture of the 4 of us from that gala? She asked, holding it delicately between her fingers. Yes, I said. Put it right on top. There was something poetic about it. A photograph from years ago where 2 married couples smiled for the camera, all 4 of us standing inches from the people who'd ruin us later. So close. So blind. So unaware. Aubrey pressed it neatly on top of the folders. I moved next. I lit the candles on the side table, nothing overly romantic, just soft lighting to match the natural glow from the windows. We dimmed the overhead lights slightly. The playlist was already cued. A jazz instrumental station. The kind of music you'd expect to hear on a date night. The kind of background score they'd never forget after today. Then, we sat down. The wine glasses stayed empty. That was intentional too. We didn't come here to celebrate. We came here to watch the truth unfold. As we waited, I checked the time. 3:12 p.m. They said checking around for? Aubrey asked, sipping her tea. Yeah, I said. Betrayal mentioned leaving early to beat traffic. So we'll probably see them soon. We sat there, 2 people waiting to detonate a quiet bomb. I didn't fidget. Didn't pace. I'd done all that in the early days, back when I first discovered the messages. Back when the betrayal felt like acid poured into my lungs. But that was before. Now I was just still. Do you think they'll talk first? Aubrey asked after a long pause. I looked at her. Maybe. Or maybe they'll just stand there, frozen. I hope they do, she said, her voice colder now. I hope they feel the weight of it before we even speak. I nodded. They will. Outside, the sky had begun to shift to that late afternoon gold. You know the one. That golden hour glow that makes everything feel cinematic. It almost felt wrong to waste it on people like them. 3:48 p.m. The wind carried the distant sound of tires crunching gravel. Aubrey stiffened slightly. I looked out the side window. A silver SUV. Marcus's. They're here, I said quietly. We didn't move. We just sat back on the couch, shoulders squared, expressions neutral. Not angry. Not smug. Just prepared. The sound of car doors slamming. Laughter. Footsteps on the wooden path. Then, the front door creaked open. Marcus entered first, laughing at something. His duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He had sunglasses on and a rolled-up shirt sleeve like he was ready to pop champagne and tell lies. He took 2 steps inside and stopped. I watched his face change. It wasn't dramatic. Not at first. Just a subtle tightening. A confusion. His smile faltered. Then, Betrayal stepped in behind him, phone in hand, grinning as she said something I couldn't hear. When she saw us, her entire body went rigid. The color drained from her face so fast it was like watching a painting stripped bare. Her phone slipped from her fingers and hit the hardwood with a dull clack. Aubrey was the first to speak. Calm, measured, chilling. "Welcome," she said. "Hope traffic wasn't too bad." Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His sunglasses slipped slightly down his nose, and his eyes darted between the two of us, then the folders, then the wine glasses. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. I leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just direct. "No, Marcus. It's exactly what it looks like. You came here to cheat on your wife with mine. The only difference is we showed up first." Brielle looked like someone had drained the air out of her lungs. She stumbled back a step. "Jason, I can explain." "No need," I said, my voice even. "We brought receipts this time." I gestured to the folders. "You were supposed to be at a client retreat," I continued. "Instead, you brought another man into the house I built for us. You thought I wouldn't know. You thought I was too kind, too dumb, too trusting." She didn't speak. Just stood there, shaking slightly, mouth open like the words had fled her. Marcus turned to Aubrey, eyes pleading. "Aubrey, please, this was a mistake. A moment of weakness." She didn't blink. "You booked this trip 3 weeks ago. That's a long moment." He looked to me, then to the table, then to Brielle. "They set us up," he muttered. "No," Aubrey corrected. "You set yourselves up. We just turned on the lights." It was like the air had shifted. The fantasy they'd built began to dissolve, right there in front of us. All the sneaking around, the secrecy, the smugness. It collapsed in on itself, like a house made of wet tissue paper. They didn't move. They didn't sit. They didn't even try to touch the folders. Because deep down, they knew it was all true. And we were done pretending. 5:48 p.m. I'll never forget the time. It's the kind of detail that stamps itself into your memory like the moment lightning hits a tree and you smell the burn forever after. 5:48 p.m. The second the silver SUV pulled into the driveway of my beach house with 2 people inside who had no idea their illusion was seconds from collapse. Aubrey and I didn't speak. We just watched through the slatted blinds, silent, still. She sat beside me on the couch, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. There was no fear in her, no trembling, just calm. I envied that about her. It made me feel steadier just sitting next to her. Outside, I saw Marcus climb out of the driver's side first. Confident, sunglasses perched on his nose, hair neatly styled like he'd just stepped off the cover of a casual luxury travel magazine. He walked around the car, opened the door for Brielle. She was laughing, actually laughing, until she wasn't. The moment she stepped inside and saw us, the sound died in her throat like a record needle scratching to a halt. She froze. Marcus followed, carrying their overnight bags. As soon as he saw us, 2 figures sitting silently in a living room bathed in warm light and soft jazz, he dropped one of the bags. The moment had finally arrived. Aubrey was the first to speak, and her voice was so calm it made the silence more unnerving. "Welcome," she said, without even turning her head. Hope traffic wasn't too bad. It hit them like a wave. Brielle's mouth dropped open. Her eyes darted across the room, from the wine glasses on the table to the printed folders, to the photo of the 4 of us sitting neatly atop them. Her phone slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow thud. She didn't even react. Marcus stepped forward, just barely, then stopped, like gravity had suddenly gotten heavier. This isn't what it looks like," he said. It came out too fast, too rehearsed. I stood, not aggressively, just upright, present, done sitting for liars. "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied, keeping my voice level. "The only difference is we arrived early. So we could watch your little fantasy crumble in real time." Brielle took a step back, her heels clicking against the wood floor. "Jason, please. I can explain." "No," I said. "You really can't. Not this time." Aubrey stood next to me. Not behind me. Not beside. With me. Equal. United in this strange, awful clarity. Marcus looked at her. "Aubrey, listen, this wasn't." She cut him off with a single, cold look. 3 weeks ago," she said, "you told me you had a leadership summit in San Diego. I made you a travel bag. I packed your vitamins. While you were planning this trip with her." Her voice didn't waver. "You lied. You packed this bag yourself, didn't you?" she added, gesturing to the duffel on the floor. He looked like a balloon losing air. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." "But it did," I said, stepping forward. You meant every touch, every kiss, every message. You meant to bring my wife into my house. That's not a mistake, Marcus. That's a plan. Brielle turned toward me, her voice desperate now. I didn't want to hurt you, Jason. I got confused. I didn't know how to tell you. You knew how to lie, though, I said. You knew how to delete messages, create fake calendar events, how to laugh at my jokes while sneaking around behind my back. That takes skill. She started crying then. Or trying to. But I wasn't buying it. Not anymore. I'd spent the last month grieving a woman who had already left me in every way that mattered. This moment? This wasn't about sadness. It was a reckoning. Marcus stepped toward Aubrey again. Let's talk. In private. She didn't move. Everything you need to know is in the folder. You printed our conversations? He asked, flinching like someone slapped him. She nodded. I wanted to make sure you couldn't lie your way out this time. His face twisted with something between anger and shame. He looked down at the wine glasses on the table. So what? You two are a thing now? I laughed. It came out before I could stop it. Not everything's about your drama, I said. Some people know how to sit in pain without dragging everyone into the mud. Marcus scowled, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a child caught stealing cookies. Brielle finally spoke again, softly. Jason, please, can we talk? Just us. There is no us, I said, calmly. There's you. And there's me. And whatever illusion existed between us died when you decided to bring another man into the home I paid for with 3 years of night shifts and weekend projects. You didn't just betray me, you insulted me. Her lip trembled. I thought maybe. I don't know. Maybe we could work through this, eventually. Aubrey looked at her then. You brought your affair partner to a house your husband built with his own hands. Do you really think there's a maybe left after that? The room was so silent, you could hear the ocean outside. Eventually, I walked to the table, opened my folder, and placed a single envelope on top. Inside are divorce papers, my lawyer's contact information, the deed transfer form, and a letter explaining what accounts I've closed. She blinked rapidly. You already signed them? 2 nights ago, I said. I've been ready since I saw that first message. Marcus turned to Aubrey, maybe thinking she'd still be hesitating. But she wasn't. Don't bother asking me to stay, she said to him. I already packed your things. They'll be on the porch by the time you get home. The color left his face. Then, Aubrey picked up her folder, tucked it under her arm, and turned toward the door. I followed her. We didn't look back. Behind us, Brielle gasped out something like my name. Marcus muttered, this is insane. But we kept walking. The front door closed with a quiet click behind us. No slamming. No theatrics. The wind hit my face like a wake-up call. Aubrey stood beside me on the porch. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then she looked over at me and asked, feel any lighter? I thought about it. Not lighter, I said. Just freer. We walked toward our cars in silence. Side by side. No more illusions. No more lies. Just 2 people stepping out of the wreckage with their heads held high. I never liked the word closure. It always sounded too neat. Too clean. Like you could package up betrayal into a tidy little box, tape it shut, and move on. But standing there, watching Marcus and Brielle deflate like 2 punctured balloons in the house they thought was theirs for the weekend, it was the closest thing to closure I've ever known. When Aubrey and I turned and walked out, we didn't rush. We didn't slam the door or scream or demand anything. We just left the mess behind, like 2 people who had finally set down a burden we never agreed to carry. But we didn't drive off immediately. At least, I didn't. I waited outside, parked just around the bend behind the trees, where the car couldn't be seen from the house. I needed one last glimpse, one last moment to anchor this before it became memory. Through the wide bay window, I saw Brielle still standing, staring down at the documents I'd left. Divorce papers, account closures, the end of everything. Her hand tea. Marcus sat on the edge of the couch, head in his hands, shoulders hunched like a child caught cheating on a test. No defiance, no justification, just the heavy weight of a story that was no longer theirs to spin. The house was quiet now. I could tell. That specific kind of silence that settles when all the lies have been pulled into the light and left there to rot. I finally started the engine. Aubrey had already pulled away. She texted me a simple, "Thank you. I needed that." I replied. So did I. Take care of yourself. That was it. No need for anything more. I drove for hours that night. Didn't even know where I was headed. Just turned on an old playlist, something from our early marriage years, when Brielle and I still held hands in the car and laughed at each other's terrible singing. I let the songs play anyway, let them scrape at me a little. Sometimes pain has to finish its path through you before it leaves. Around midnight, I pulled into a motel off the interstate and crashed. Not from exhaustion, but from release. When I woke up the next morning, I felt something new. Not anger, not sadness, emptiness, but in a good way. Like space had been cleared inside me. Space I could finally use to build something else. Something better. By Monday, I was back in the city. I returned to our condo like it was a hotel I'd overstayed in. Cold. Stale. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the bedsheets. Her clothes still hung in the closet like they had rights. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply started packing. I boxed up everything she'd left behind. Her designer heels, her favorite scarves, her silver bracelets she swore she never took off. All of it went into 2 neat boxes. I labeled them, return to sender. I placed them by the door and texted her. Your things are packed. I'll be out Thursday. Come by before then if you want them. She replied 10 minutes later. Jason, please. Can we talk? I ignored it. A few hours later, another text. I made a mistake. I see that now. Can we try to fix it? Please. Still ignored it. Then came the real twist. The one that hit harder than expected. She sent. I think I'm pregnant. I stared at that message for a long, long time. Not because I believed her. Not because it changed anything. But because it was just sad. Sad how quickly people will reach for the nearest rope when they realize they're falling. Whether or not it was true, I didn't care. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. That version of my life, the one where I was her husband, her fixer, her cushion, that man didn't live here anymore. Still, I replied. If it's true, it's not mine. Handle it with Marcus. She didn't reply after that. Not for days. Meanwhile, I kept moving. I canceled joint accounts. Sold the SUV I'd bought in both our names. Transferred the beach house back into my trust. I called my lawyer and confirmed the divorce was being processed as uncontested. She hadn't even tried to fight it. Maybe she knew better. Maybe she was too ashamed. I kept the folders. One night, about a week after the beach house confrontation, I opened them again. Not to revisit the pain, but to remember the truth. That's something people don't talk about enough. How easy it is to forget the full picture once the tears dry. Your brain starts rewriting things, softening the edges. That's when people make dumb decisions. That's when they go back to the people who broke them. But not me. I made myself remember. I read every message again. Every lie. Every plan they made behind my back. I made myself feel it, fully, completely. Because I never wanted to look at her again and think, maybe it wasn't that bad. It was that bad. And I deserved better. Aubrey called me one evening. Not to rehash anything, just to check in. I moved out, she said. Got a small place near the marina. Marcus keeps emailing. I blocked him. You okay? I asked. She laughed, not bitter, just worn. Getting there. Some days I feel strong. Other days I sit on the floor of my kitchen and wonder how I missed it for so long. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Same here, I said. You ever think we'll trust anyone again? She asked. I thought about that. I think we will, I said. Not the same way, but smarter, cleaner, wiser. She was quiet for a moment. Thanks again, she said. For not yelling. For not being another man who made this worse. You too, I said. You made the worst day of my life survivable. We didn't speak again after that. Not in a sad way. Just finished. Like two survivors who held hands during the flood and then drifted apart once the waters receded. And as for Brielle, she called once more. Left a voicemail. I miss you, she whispered. I know I ruined everything. But there's still a part of me that hopes you'll call back. Even if it's just to say goodbye. But I didn't call back. Because I had already said goodbye. I just hadn't used words. It was supposed to end at the beach house. That moment, when Brielle dropped her phone and Marcus stumbled through his excuses, felt like the climax, the last twist before the credits rolled. I thought the worst of it was done. I thought I'd already seen the full extent of their betrayal. But betrayal has layers. And that day, in that living room filled with candlelight and silence, Aubrey peeled back one more. We had already laid out the evidence. My folder, her folder, the receipts of their affair, the carefully assembled map of every lie they'd told. But while Marcus squirmed and Brielle wept, I noticed something shift in Aubrey. Her eyes narrowed. Her breath slowed. I knew that look. She wasn't done yet. She reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope. Plain, cream-colored, handwritten name on the front in block letters, Marcus R. He looked up at her, confused. His mouth opened. But she didn't wait for permission. She dropped it on the table. It landed with a sharp slap that echoed more than any shouting would have. "Did you forget to tell her about the apartment in Fairbanks?" she asked. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, dangerous. Brielle blinked. "What apartment?" Marcus froze. His entire posture shifted from defensive to terrified. Aubrey didn't flinch. "The one he's had for almost a year. Under a different name. Paid in cash. Fully furnished. I found the lease last month. And I found something else too." She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of photos. Copies, clearly. Surveillance-style shots. A woman entering and leaving the apartment. Not Brielle. Someone else. My stomach twisted. Marcus tried to grab the photos, but she pulled them back. "Sit down," she said sharply, her voice more steel than sound. He obeyed. Brielle looked at him, panic spreading across her face. "Who is she?" Marcus didn't answer. I stepped back, watching the house of cards collapse from a distance. It was no longer about me now, or Aubrey. It was about two people who thought they were the center of the universe, and were now watching it turn without them. "You weren't just using my wife," I said quietly. "You were using her to distract from someone else." Brielle looked like she'd been slapped. "That's not true," Marcus said. But his voice was hollow, weak. The confidence he walked in with had completely evaporated. Aubrey held up her phone and opened an audio file. "Would you like me to play the voicemail she left you last week? The one where she called you my husband in secret?" His jaw clenched. "That's not what she meant," he muttered. "She ended the message with, 'I can't wait until you finally leave Aubrey and we can stop hiding,'" Aubrey said. "So yeah, I think it is what she meant." The room was spinning now. Not literally, but emotionally. Like the foundation of everything they built, every smug, self-righteous justification was crumbling right underneath them. Brielle stepped away from him, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You said I was the only one," she whispered. Marcus looked at her. "You were." "Don't lie again," Aubrey snapped. "Not here. Not now." He shut his mouth. For the first time, I actually felt a strange, twisted sense of pity. Not for him. Not for Brielle. But for how empty their connection really was. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust anymore. It was a lie built on top of another lie. A mess wrapped in fantasy. And now, all the mirrors were shattered. Then came the next blow. Brielle turned to me, her eyes wide and glassy. Her voice barely more than a whisper. "I think I'm pregnant." The words floated in the air like poison gas. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I looked at her. Really looked. Her face, so carefully made up. Her eyes searching mine for softness. A flicker of the man she used to know. The man she thought would crumble. The man she thought would offer her a lifeline even now. But I was no longer that man. "Then he's your problem now," I said. Calm. Clear. Cold. She choked. You're not even going to ask?" "No," I said. "Because I already know it's not mine." I handed her a second envelope. This one thinner. Inside, a paternity waiver form from my lawyer, pending confirmation. A notarized statement. And the results of my own private fertility exam from 3 years ago, something she'd never known about. Her mouth dropped open. "You knew?" she asked. "I knew I couldn't have children," I said. "I just didn't think you'd use that against me." She sank onto the couch like her knees had given out. Marcus looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. Aubrey stepped beside me and took a breath. She wasn't smiling, but there was satisfaction in her posture. A woman who had done what she came to do, who had nothing left to prove. "I'd say we're done here," she said. I looked at Brielle, then Marcus. "You thought you were clever. You thought no one would catch you. That you could juggle lies and still have somewhere soft to land," I said. I stepped closer to Brielle, just once. "You brought him into my home, lied to my face for months. You laughed behind my back. And now, when the walls finally fall in, you want me to feel sorry for you." She opened her mouth. No sound came out. "I don't," I said. "I feel free." Aubrey placed the folder back on the table. "I won't see you again," she said to Marcus. "Don't call me. Don't try to explain. This was your chance. You wasted it." She turned and walked toward the door. I followed. Neither of us looked back. As we stepped onto the porch, I exhaled. The sky was beginning to darken. The sound of the waves in the distance wasn't comforting, it was clarifying, like something pure waiting on the other side of all the rot. Aubrey looked at me, her voice low. We didn't just expose the truth, she said. We survived it. I nodded. And we left it behind. And with that, we walked away from the house that had held the lie and stepped back into the life we were about to rebuild, on our own terms. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is this: it doesn't end in the moment you find out. That's just the beginning. The fallout comes later, when the calls keep coming, when the guilt trips start rolling in, when the people who tore you apart suddenly remember that you once loved them. And they hope love makes you forget. But I didn't forget. Not a single detail. Not the messages. Not the lies. Not the way Brielle stood in my beach house, holding another man's hand like I was a stranger. I'd buried enough of myself in that marriage. I wasn't about to bury my peace too. 3 days after the beach house confrontation, Brielle showed up at the condo. I didn't let her in. She stood outside the building's glass doors with swollen eyes, a crumpled tissue in one hand and a pathetic bouquet in the other. I watched from the upstairs window, unmoved. The front desk had already been told not to buzz her up. She stood there for nearly 30 minutes, pacing, dialing, pacing again. My phone lit up 6 times. I didn't answer. She eventually slid a note under the front entrance. Please, just give me 10 minutes. We were good once. I made a mistake, but I'm still me. No, she wasn't. The version of her I loved, the one who laughed at my dad's jokes, who used to cry during wildlife documentaries, who held my hand in grocery store lines, that person was long gone. She'd been replaced by someone who didn't flinch while burning down the life we built together. So, I didn't respond. Because closure doesn't come from conversations with people who shattered you. It comes from choosing peace over chaos. I had already picked peace. The next day, I met with my lawyer. The divorce papers had been submitted. We didn't need court battles. No property disputes. The condo was in my name. The beach house too. We had no children. No pets. I had taken her off every joint account within 48 hours of the reveal. There wasn't much for her to cling to anymore. She hasn't contested anything, my lawyer said, tapping the file. Just a short note. She asked if you consider counseling first. I laughed. It was bitter, but brief. Counseling doesn't work when one person shows up wearing a mask. He nodded and slid the papers across the table for my signature. Once you sign here, there's no going back. I signed without hesitating. The pen didn't even shake in my hand. When I got home that evening, I found another note taped to my door. You don't have to forgive me now. But someday I hope you remember that I loved you too. I just got lost. I stared at it for a moment, then folded it neatly and dropped it in the trash. Getting lost isn't an excuse for burning someone else's map. Aubrey called the next morning, not to talk about Marcus, not to rehash the past, just to check in. That had become our quiet ritual. Once or twice a week, one of us would call or text the other. No deep analysis. No drama. Just mutual understanding between two people who'd gone through hell and refused to carry the fire back home. How are you? She asked, her voice steady. I'm learning to sleep again, I said. She chuckled lightly. Same. There was a pause. Then she said, Marcus tried to send me flowers. Classy. I had them returned to his office. With a note that said, I'm not your loose end. I smiled at that. Aubrey had always had a quiet fire under her calm. The kind that doesn't scream, it just incinerates. Do you think they're still seeing each other? I asked. She sighed. Maybe. Or maybe they're both just sitting in the wreckage, realizing no one's coming to save them. Good, I said. Let them stay there. It wasn't vengeful. It was just final. That weekend, I took a long walk along the marina. I stopped at a local shop and bought a journal. Black leather. Unmarked. That night, I sat down and started writing, not about Brielle, not about Marcus, but about me, what I wanted, who I'd become, what I would no longer accept in my life. Page 1. You don't owe anyone your peace just because you used to love them. It became my new rule. The messages from Brielle slowed, but didn't stop. Every few days, a new attempt. Sometimes guilt. I gave you the best years of my life, and you just walked away. Sometimes blame. You were cold. I was lonely. You never saw me anymore. And sometimes, desperation. I think I'm really pregnant. And I don't know what to do. I never replied. Not once. Because every message was a hook. And I was done being baited. Instead, I lived. I learned to cook for one. I played old jazz records on Sunday mornings. I rearranged the furniture in the condo, moved the couch she picked out, threw away the rug we bought together, repainted the hallway. It sounds small, but it mattered. I needed to reclaim my space, one wall at a time. And I started going to therapy. Quiet sessions once a week, just me and a notebook and a man who asked the right questions. Why did it take you so long to let go? He asked once. Because I thought letting go meant I failed, I said. But now I see. Holding on was the failure. He nodded. Then you're ahead of most. I left that session lighter. One night, about 6 weeks after the confrontation, I passed by a restaurant near the downtown waterfront. There, through the window, I saw them, Brielle and Marcus. Not close. Not affectionate. Just sitting across from each other. Stiff. Silent. Like two people who realized too late that the fantasy wasn't enough to build a life on. I didn't go in. Didn't wave. Didn't gloat. I just kept walking. Because the truth was simple, they didn't own me anymore. Not my pain. Not my attention. Not my future. As I stood at the edge of the water, watching the boats rock gently in their slips, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from peace. And peace, I learned, isn't something people give you. It's something you choose. Even after betrayal. Even after heartbreak. Especially then. 6 months later, I found myself standing on the balcony of my new place, a modest but open condo overlooking the harbor. The kind with wide windows, clean lines, and just enough space for one person to stretch without echo. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't what Brielle would have picked. And that's exactly why I loved it. I didn't move here to hide. I moved here to begin again. There's something quiet about being alone, not lonely, just alone, that brings a strange kind of peace. For years, my life was filled with noise. Her laugh, her footsteps, the sound of her voice arguing on phone calls I wasn't supposed to overhear. But now? Mornings start with sunlight hitting my kitchen counter, a slow cup of coffee, and Coltrane playing through the speaker as I cook breakfast for one. I don't rush anymore. I don't pace. I don't explain my every decision to someone who already made up their mind to leave me long before she walked out. I've learned something in this time. Starting over isn't a one-time event. It's a skill, a daily choice. Like healing, but deliberate, and clumsy, and sometimes quiet enough to feel like nothing's changing until suddenly you realize everything has. My routine isn't extravagant. I wake early. I run by the water. I read more. I've started journaling again, something I stopped doing years ago when I thought I had everything figured out. Funny how losing what you thought was secure makes you hungry for clarity again. And I go to therapy. Still. Every Tuesday at 4. It's not about fixing myself, because I wasn't broken. It's about unpacking. Understanding why I let certain things slide. Why I believed love meant tolerance instead of partnership. Why I thought patience could solve problems born from deceit. My therapist, Paul, once asked me, "What do you want from your next relationship?" I didn't hesitate. Peace. He nodded. Peace doesn't mean perfect. You know that, right? I know, I said. But it does mean mutual. Safe. Honest. That's the bar now. Not flowers or grand gestures. Just consistency. Truth. A partner who tells the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Do I miss Brielle? No. I miss who I thought she was. There's a big difference. Sometimes, when I'm out, at a bookstore or waiting in line for coffee, I see a woman with a laugh that sounds like hers, or I catch a whiff of the perfume she used to wear. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds me of how far I've come. Like a scar that no longer aches, just sits there quietly, reminding you of what you survived. And then there's Aubrey. We still talk. Not daily. Not romantically. But we check in. Like old soldiers who went through the same war and lived to tell the story. She moved to a small waterfront apartment of her own. Took up painting again. Teaches kids on weekends at the community center. Her laugh. We sat across from each other in a small Italian place, the kind with flickering candles and too much garlic in the air. We didn't talk about them. We didn't need to. Instead, we talked about music. About what we learned. About the strange way betrayal teaches you to love yourself better. At one point, she said, "I'm not scared of being alone anymore." I smiled. Neither am I. She sipped her wine and gave me this look, half grateful, half amused. Can you believe how blind we were? We weren't blind, I said. We were committed. There's a difference. She nodded slowly. Still, I won't ignore red flags again. Same, I said. One lie, and I'm out the door. We laughed. Not bitter. Just real. Two people who knew better now. When we hugged goodbye that night, it wasn't sad. It wasn't complicated. Just warmth. A quiet acknowledgement that we'd been there for each other when everything else collapsed. She got into her car. I got into mine, and we drove away without looking back. I haven't dated seriously since the divorce. Not because I'm afraid, just because I'm taking my time. For once, I'm not rushing into something to prove I've healed. I am healing. Daily. Patiently. I smile more now. I say no more now. I've learned to protect my time, my energy, my space. Brielle called once, about a month ago. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. I know it's over. I know I hurt you. But I still think about you. Not because I want anything, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was wrong. And I hope you're okay. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because I'd already healed the parts of me that needed her apology. That's another thing no one tells you about moving on. You don't always need closure from the person who hurt you. Sometimes, the real closure is in how you move forward. I deleted the message. And I kept living. My condo is still a work in progress. I'm learning to decorate for me now. No more pretending I like gold accents or abstract wall art. The space looks like me now: wood, steel, quiet blues, bookshelves, a record player. I bought a plant. Haven't killed it yet. Small victories. I'm also writing more. Essays. Letters to no one. Pages of reflection that I'll probably never publish. But they help. Writing reminds me of who I am, not just who I was. I'm not just the man who got cheated on. I'm not just the husband who watched his wife unravel everything. I'm a man who stayed kind, who kept his dignity, who left when it was time, and who never begged to be loved properly. That's something I'm proud of. I've started calling my peace non-negotiable. That's my new mantra. If something disrupts it, someone, some dynamic, some doubt, I walk away. Not out of coldness, but clarity. I've earned my stillness. I won't hand it over for chaos wrapped in charm. And honestly, life's beautiful on this side. I eat when I'm hungry. I sleep when I'm tired. I answer the phone when I feel like talking. I'm not waiting for validation. I'm not chasing ghosts. And I've stopped wondering if I could have saved her from herself. Because I couldn't. Some people aren't lost. They choose to walk away from good things. That doesn't make you weak for loving them. It just means your heart was honest. And now? Now you get to love yourself just as honestly. Starting over is hard, yes. But it's also sacred. A return to the self. A chance to rebuild on your own terms. And that's what I'm doing, one quiet, peaceful, beautiful day at a time.